not practice, but I want you to get in the habit of setting up your painting station this same way each and every time you come to class. So if everybody will direct their attention up on the board, okay, and guys, I know some of you are doodlers on your paper, and that's fine, but you got to pay attention to this demo, okay? Do not let that become a distraction. All right, so when we start to work into the setup of your painting station, again, one of the things that I am aiming to do as your coach, as your instructor, as the teacher, is I want you to, again, become more efficient at painting. That way you don't waste a bunch of time trying to get things set up and then you have no time to paint. Okay, so when you come in to get set up, okay, and you follow those setup instructions that are on your paper, on your notes, on your paper, there are going to be a couple of materials that you're going to need. Okay, one thing you're going to do each day is you're going to select some brushes to use. Okay, guys, you don't need like 12 brushes, right? In fact, I have 4 in front of me and I only have been using 2, right? But you need a couple of brushes to use, not a ton, because any brushes you take, those are brushes you clean. So if you don't use them, you don't need to take them, right? In addition to that, you are going to need a water container, okay? The water is going to be at the sink. You are also going to need a paper towel. So guys, your paper towel, when you get it, should not look like this. Don't go up to the sink and grab yourself a lump of paper towels and have it in this clouded bunch. Okay, this is no good to you for this painting. When you go to get your paper towel, you are going to fold it into a flat pad like you see up on the board. Okay, do not have it as a crumpled mess. And then the last thing that you're going to need for your painting station is going to be this paper here. And that's the first thing that's listed on those notes. Okay, and that is your palette paper. Right? Mine has my name on it. You're going to get yours put on tomorrow. You are going to use your palette paper for the entire assignment, which means you are going to clean it off at the end of each period. All right, now your palette paper, as it says on your notes, is a waxed paper used for mixing paint. There is going to be a shiny side, and you guys can kind of see that shine as I move that paper around on the screen and it catches the light. This shiny side needs to be facing up. Fill in your first blank. The shiny side needs to be facing up. And you may ask, well, why do you include this as part of your notes? Well, that's because every year I have someone who flips their paper over to the wrong side and they go to try to mix their paint and they're mixing and they can't figure out why their paint is drying within seconds. Well, that's because the back of the paper has no wax on it. Okay, it will absorb all the paint and all the water. So it is going to make your paints dry out super fast. The reason why we use palette paper is because it keeps your paints damp so you can use them. Right? So to set up your paint station, you are going to put your palette paper down first. Next layer is going to be that lump of paper towels, pad of paper towels up towards the top. And then the last thing you're going to put on there is going to be your water. That's going to hold everything in place because it's heavy. And it's going to have you set up for a natural cycle like this, where I take my brush, I go into my water, I clean off my brush, I take it out of the water, I use the paper towel to press down gently to remove excess water, and then I'm right back onto my palette paper so I can mix and then eventually bring that paint over to my paper. Again, I am teaching you not only how to paint and the skills that you need, I want you to learn to become more efficient at painting as well. Okay, so that's why I want you to set up your painting station, palette paper, paper towel, and water. Okay, right? That second step of the setup says to always have a paper towel and water container. Use the paper towel to remove excess water and paint. Okay, guys, you should not have your brushes dripping wet. Okay, in fact, acrylic paint, you really don't want to mix water in with it. It will ruin the color. It will ruin the value that you create. So you are only using the water to clean out your brush. So make sure you get rid of the excess on the paper towel. The next statement says to make sure your brush is clean and damp. To fill in those blanks before painting. Make sure your brush is clean and damp before painting. In order for the acrylic paint to come back off your brush, it needs to be damp. Otherwise, it will start to dry in the bristles. Okay? You also should get in the habit of cleaning off your brush before you start painting for the class period. Okay? And I'm just going to let you in on a little secret. As ninth graders, some of your fellow classmates from other periods might not be so great at cleaning out their brushes. And the last thing you want to do is pick out what you think looks like a really good brush and bring that over to your palette and start mixing up the perfect value just to realize that the person that used it before you didn't clean it out completely. And the next thing you know, you have to start all over again. Okay? So make sure your brush is always clean and damp. And anytime you are not using your brush and it has paint on it, it needs to go back in the water so it doesn't start to dry. Okay, I'll be talking about the cleanup part that's on your notes a little bit later on in this process. So for right now, visually, I want you to switch back over to the right side of your notes because it's going to help you to kind of stay involved, stay awake. All right, and let's take a look at the painting pointers. We're going to get some of those filled in as I begin to set up my palette as well. All right, in addition to all this other stuff, your palette paper, your paper towels, your water, your brushes, the other thing that you are going to need is paint. Okay, and each class period, you are going to have a paint tray at your table. And all you'll need to do, it will already be there. All you will need to do is to take your paints and start to distribute them onto your palette paper. Notice that it says there in painting pointers, you should be only using small amounts of paints when starting out. No giant globs. Okay, I have seen how ninth graders work. Okay, and if you haven't been taught properly, your first inclination, your first instinct is going to be to take this nice marshmallowy white paint and you're going to want to dip out using the popsicle stick as much as you can possibly load onto that popsicle stick itself. And that is wrong. Okay? You only need to take the popsicle stick, dip out a tiny bit onto the end of the popsicle stick, and then tap a little bit off onto your palette. Okay? You should only be taking about the size of a pencil top eraser, like the one that's up on the board. Okay? You do not need a ton of paint. So I should not see a huge glob on your palette. Guys, any paint that ends up being left over on your palette at the end of the period, you are going to be cleaning off. And if you are putting out too much, it's going to end up going to waste. Right? Now, there is a blank there that we need to fill in, and it says more paint equals more time to see blank. Okay, and to fill in that blank, you're going to write the word change. Okay, in order for us to start seeing our values that we're going to be mixing up on this palette paper, in order to see them change, if we have huge globs of paint, we have to add that same amount or even more into that glob to even begin to see the value change. Okay, so that's why we're going to be starting out with very small amounts. That next statement there says that black is a blank pigment and you only need a very small amount to change value. Okay, in fact, as you notice here, as I start to dip out that black paint, I'm taking an even smaller amount than I did with the white. Again, I'm going to tap a little bit onto my palette. And that is because, to fill in that blank, black is a powerful pigment. And you only need a little bit of black paint to use because it is going to make a significant difference each time you add that into any of your mixtures. So black is a powerful pigment. So when we're adding black to a mixture, it is going to make that mixture darker. Okay, and when we add white into a mixture, it is going to make the value lighter. That fills in that next blank. So white will make values lighter. Now the next thing I'm going to be dipping out onto my palette paper also goes along with that next statement. And for many of you, this is going to be a material that you probably have not used before. Okay, we are going to be stepping up your painting game, which means up until now, when you were using acrylic paint, more than likely to make paints thinner, you probably added water. Okay, well, that's a no-no. We don't want to add a lot of water to acrylic paint because it will mess up the value or mess up the color itself. So instead, we are going to be using this stuff here. Okay, and when you get it in your bin, you're going to see it labeled with MM. This stands for matte medium. And as it says on your paper, matte medium will make values blank. To fill in that blank, you can write the word transparent or the word thinner. Matte medium will make values transparent or thinner. So I'm going to tap a little bit of that out onto my palette paper. It's going to look like white. You'll notice the consistency will be a little bit different when you start painting tomorrow. So you always want to make sure that you keep the white lid for the white paint and the MM for the matte medium. Okay, so now I have my palette set up. Okay, it's not really anything spectacular because we're only working with 2 paints and the matte medium. Okay, but what I want you to notice is on my palette, I have a blob of each of those paints in their pure form. So I have a blob of white, a blob of black, and matte medium. Notice that I left some space in between them. Okay? And the reason for that is we want to make sure that those paints stay pure. If we put them right up against one another, you're going to end up having contaminated paints. Now, in addition to that, I should never, ever, and if you see a classmate doing this, correct them. Okay, you should never be taking your paintbrush and dipping it directly into these containers of paint that are going to be at your table. Okay, these paints are for everybody to use and we don't want them contaminated by someone taking and putting their brush in it. Okay, so anytime that you are working with paint, you always bring it to your palette. Okay, now to finish out those notes that are on there, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to use that paint that's on the palette paper. Remember that you're always keeping that blob of pure pigment, as I just said, and you are going to mix in another area, which I'll show you here in a moment. That next statement, it says never dip from the blank of the blobs, always drag pigment from the edge. Okay, to fill in that blank, write the word middle. Never dip from the middle of your paint blobs. Right? The reason why I do not want you to dip from the middle of the paint blobs is the same reason I don't want you to use your paintbrush to get paints out of the cups. It will contaminate the pure pigment, and then you won't have paint to use. Sorry, I'm just waiting for a couple people to focus back in. All right, when mixing paint, the last thing you want to remember is you do not want to mix like you're mixing up a cake. Okay, every year I see someone going into their painting palette over here and taking a bunch of their white and a bunch of the black and a bunch of the matte medium and stirring and mixing it around like they were mixing up cake batter on their palette paper. Guys, the more you spread out your paint, the faster it will dry. And this goes back to those characteristics of acrylic paint. If you start to get paint that dries too quickly, you're going to become frustrated. Okay, so you should only be mixing in small little areas of a blob, kind of like I'm doing here with my fingertips. That way you don't have your paint dry out. All right, before you can put your painting notes to the side, the last thing I need you to add, and you can put this at the top of your paper, you can put it at the bottom of your paper, you can put it on the side. I don't really care where you put it, but I need you to write down those 4 numbers that are up on the board. I need you to write down the numbers 1, 3, 6, and 9. Again, those same numbers that are up on the board, 1, 3, 6, and 9. Right now, as I go into the demo and using these paints and understanding how to take the paints themselves and start matching it up with the values, when we start this first phase, when we start phase 1, the underpainting as we call it, we are only going to be painting using the values number 1, 3, 6, and 9. Okay, now some of you are going to know already from your scanning that you did last week, you're going to know that you have values on that entire range. And you might be questioning, well, how am I going to paint and create that illusion of these objects having dimension if I can only use 1, 3, 6, and 9? Well, to answer that, this first phase is going to be your underpainting. This is the structure. This is what we're going to build on top of. Okay, and this underpainting is going to be almost a lighter version of what you are seeing in your example. It's also going to be a much flatter version as well. So what I mean by that is you're not going to see all of your changes in value just yet. That comes later in your other phases. So the first phase, as you can see as the result of my demo from my other periods, the first phase is going to look kind of childish. It's going to look flat. It's not going to have dimension, but it will eventually. Okay? So for this first layer, it's almost like we're going to sketch in our base values. Okay, some artists will refer to this stage as the blocking in stage. Okay, so again, this is going to look blocky, childish. It might look kind of streaky and not the best. Okay, it will look better. We will build on top of it. Okay, but the first part that we're going to create is going to be the underpainting. Okay, so some things that you're going to need as part of the painting, underpainting itself, you still need to have your value scanner because you're actually going to be testing your values right onto this. Okay, the other thing that you are going to need, and I'll remind you of this tomorrow, is along your border, along your outside edge. And guys, if you are noodling and doodling on your paper right now, I suggest you stop because this is where it gets kind of heavy as far as the information goes. All right, over here on the border, notice I have a series of lines that I drew. Those are going to be your test lines. This is how you're going to know whether your paints are opaque, meaning you cannot see through them, or if they are transparent, meaning you can. Our underpainting is going to be a transparent layer. Okay, so those lines over here, they're going to be really, really important. Okay, so what I want to do is I need to do a little quick analysis of my objects up top so that I know what values I'm going to start with. Okay, and I'm actually going to use this pair over here because I've mapped this one out. And I noticed that I have a value of 2, 4, 8, 11, and then all the way down here to a 12. And then I have to remember back for my underpainting, I'm only using value 1, 3, 6, and 9. So what I have to do is I have to take this object that has this whole range of values and I have to figure out where does the middle value, where's the middle gray kind of fall into? Okay, and for me, if I have a 4 and if I have an 8, I would say the middle would be roughly about a 6. Okay, but that's not the last step before I start the painting. I want to go one value down, one value lighter. So I'm actually going to start this pair out as a value of 3. And then I'm going to end up adding my lighter areas and I'm going to build on top of it to create the darker areas. Okay, so I've already assessed, I'm going to use a level 3 for this one. I'm going to use a level 3 for this, and these, pardon me, 2 brighter ones that appear on the opposite side. So that tells me I need to start mixing up a value of 3 on my palette. So I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to use one, I think actually, yes, I'm going to still use this one. So I'm going to grab my flat brush. And guys, for this first layer, because it is going to be kind of blocky, you are not going to have little tiny baby brushes to use, right? These are all going to be done with a larger brush. So I'm going to take my damp brush, and I know if I'm mixing up a level 3, it's going to need a pretty good amount of white. So I'm going to take a blob off of my pure pigment, make a mixing area just down below. Notice I'm not going back in and rinsing off my paintbrush. That's inefficient, and I'm probably going to get too much water mixed in. But rather, I'm just going to go up to my black pigment. I know that it's a powerful pigment, and I only need a little bit. So I'm going to nudge right into the edge of that blob. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit onto my brush. You can see it there on screen. And now I'm going to start to mix that into my mixture. Okay, and as I start to mix that black pigment around, notice I'm not mixing up a cake. I'm trying to keep it kind of grouped together. Okay, once I mix that around, and I know since I'm using a lighter value, it's going to be a tiny bit tougher to see. But once I have that mixture created, my next step is to test it. So you are going to come right back up to wherever your value scanner is, and you are going to test it right on your value scanner Or another option is to actually create a little swatch over on the side. Okay, these lighter values don't always show up the best on screen, but it's over here. It's really not showing up. Okay, but it's over here. What I can do is I can create a little swatch, let it dry for a quick moment. You can see it starting to show up there. And I can actually put my scanner right over top of that pigment. And I can test it just like I did when I was scanning through my image. Right? So I tested this down below and I noticed that that's a pretty good level 3. So I have the value first. I'm going to go over to my test lines and I'm going to paint over top of them. Okay. Now notice what happens when I paint it over top of those lines. See how the lines start to disappear? That tells me that my paint is too opaque. It's too thick. So if my paint is too thick, my next step on my palette is to go into my matte medium. I already have my value, so once I get that set, all I have to do is start putting some matte medium into that mixture. It's not going to change the value, but what it is going to change is going to be the opacity. So if I now take that paint that has matte medium mixed into it and I paint over those test lines, notice I can still see my lines through that paint, so I know it's thin enough. And now I can start to use that mixture that I have to go in and begin to add it to my painting. All right, now again, because this is going to be a light value, it's going to be a little tougher to see on screen, so I'm going to get a couple of areas painted in so I can hopefully create a little more contrast for you to see it. So when we're doing this underpainting and when we are essentially blocking things in, because it's nice and thin and it's nice and light, I can paint back over details. Like for example, for this pear here, instead of trying to paint around the stem, I just painted right over it. I'm going to build into that later when I start to work into my details. Okay, down here in this pear, even though I know it needs to get darker in some areas, I'm just painting the whole thing in with a solid value to start with. The same way that I did over here on these pears. Now this one, this is a little bit darker. Okay, this pear here you can see in my example has a bit more of a value to it. So instead of a level 3, I'm going to bump that one up to a 6 to start with. So I know this mixture is nice and thin. It just needs to be darker. So I'm going to pop back into a little black. Even though it's already thinned down, I can still go and test it on my scanner. Okay, and it's a pretty good value. It's a tiny bit dark, so I'm actually going to drag some more of that white back into it. I'm going to go back into my matte medium, test it out one last time. And now what I'm going to do, went a little too far, lightness. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm going to start to paint that darker pear as a solid shape. I'm going to go right over that other stem. It's nice and thin so I can still see my my lines through it. Okay, and then in these areas here where I might have shadow, I'm going to block that in too. So notice I'm not trying to be perfect in this application of paint. Okay, it's still very much chunky and kind of blocky, and that's okay. I have a little overlap, a little layering there. That's fine. I'll work that out later on, right? But what we're trying to accomplish in this underpainting is, again, a lighter version and a transparent version of your painting, okay? Eventually, as we start to work through our other layers, we're going to begin to create all those different changes in value. I'll talk about how to blend in another demo later on, right? But your first job as part of your painting is going to be to create this underpainting layer, okay? Nice and thin and also solid. Doesn't have a lot of dimension yet, but it will eventually. Now, at the end of the period, one of the things that you will have to do is you will have to clean out any brushes that you've taken. Okay, the first thing you should always do is just use the water at your table to swish it around and try and get as much of that paint out and broken up as possible. Okay, guys, this swishing it around in your container does not make it clean. You will always have to go to the sink and thoroughly clean out your brushes. The other thing that you will need to do is you will need to clean off your palette each class period. If you forget to clean off your palette, or if you do not do it thoroughly every day, your palette will get dirty, but you will have to use it until the end of the assignment. Okay, the palette is super easy to clean off as long as you're not taking a bunch of extra paint. Okay, right now I have a lot of paint on there, which unfortunately is going to go to waste. Okay, so I'm going to take my paper towel. Okay, if I only have a little bit of paint, I can dip it into my water, squeeze out the excess. That way it's just damp. And then I can simply take that paper towel, give my palette a wipe and a wipe like so. Now my palette is clean. It will dry within a minute or so. And then your palette paper and your painting would both go into your storage space. And then you would work on cleaning up your brushes and your water containers at the sink. Okay, since you are my last class of 2D, you have one last job every day, and that's just simply to take the paint containers, scrape off the excess, like you're seeing me do up on the board. Okay, put the lid back on it tightly, popsicle stick on top, and then this would go into the container, okay, or into the bin that's at your table, and that's gonna go to the back counter. Okay, guys, I will remind you of cleanup on the paints tomorrow when we actually have them out. And I will take a moment at the end of the period to show you how you're going to clean out your brushes as well. Right? Tomorrow, some of you are going to be ready to start into the painting process. Some of you might still need to finish up drawing. Some of you might need to finish up value scanning. But for those who are ready, you are going to start working into your painting process of underpainting tomorrow. Okay, I'll bring up some additional reminders and notes tomorrow on the screen so you'll have those. You should always have these notes out with you as well. It's a good place to test things if you need it, but also good reminders on how to utilize the acrylic paint. All right, we are not going to go and take these notes to the storage room. Right, it's just a waste of time. What I need you to make sure that you do is you have your name on the top of it. You are going to make a pile up here on the corner of my table. And then tomorrow, I will get those back to you and we will start the painting process. All right, we have a couple of moments until the end of the period so you can sit, relax, get yourself organized and ready to go. And then we'll start to apply all this information to your painting tomorrow. All right, any other notes, papers? Don't give them to me, then you're responsible for them until tomorrow. No!